When Mom said, "It's a private family trip," I didn't know they meant Greece without me. My sister smirked as they used my card for flights and a $14,200 yacht rental. I canceled everything overnight. By 6:03 a.m., my phone lit up. Transactions declined. 29 missed calls later, they begged me to fix it. But I wasn't done yet. At 6:03 a.m., my phone started going insane. Notifications. Calls. Declined transaction alerts stacked like a slot machine. 33 in total. I didn't even have to look to know something had gone down. Somewhere across the ocean, my family was losing their minds. It started days earlier, with a lie so casual I barely caught it. I had just gotten home from a weekend trip with my friend Danielle. We'd been celebrating. After 3 years of scraping by as a freelance designer, I was finally making real money. 2 new clients, both on monthly retainers. I could pay rent and not panic about groceries. For once, I was okay. When I told my parents, my dad smiled that polite, distracted smile of his. My mom, Cheryl, asked if I was still with the same bank. My little sister, Emma, just laughed and said, "Maybe now you can afford to visit somewhere that doesn't smell like printer ink." I laughed it off. They were always like that, a little dismissive, a little condescending. I figured it came from how I'd always been the struggling artist, while Emma was the one who got straight A's and family applause. 2 days later, my mom texted asking if she could use my card to order some textbooks for Emma's last semester. "We'll pay you right back," she said. I hesitated for maybe 2 seconds, but it was my mom. So I sent her the info. That's where it started. The first charge, $312 from a travel agency, then $480 from some hotel booking site. A few hours later, $2,100 from Delta Airlines. I thought it was fraud at first. I was seconds away from freezing the card when I got curious, opened Emma's Instagram just to distract myself. There she was, standing in an airport lounge, holding a mimosa. Caption, "Kicking off the best week ever with the fam, greasebound, my stomach turned to ice." I scrolled. Photo after photo. My mom and Emma in matching sunglasses. A first-class cabin selfie. Hashtags about family time. But no mention of me. I checked my email and felt my chest cave in. Receipts, confirmations, booking details, all tied to my card and my email address. Yacht rental. Santorini Resort. First-class return tickets. Total $14,200. I called my mom immediately. No answer. Then I texted her, "Why are there charges from Delta and a yacht company under my name?" She replied within seconds, "It's a private family trip. We just needed a little help. We'll pay you back, don't make a big deal." That line, private family trip, hit like a punch. Private family. As in, I wasn't family, just the wallet. I didn't reply, I didn't cry either. I just sat there shaking until the anger settled into something colder. By midnight, I had canceled everything. Every flight, every hotel, every yacht booking. The companies all confirmed it, the email matched, the card matched. It was my identity they'd used. When I finally turned my phone off, it was silent, peaceful. But when I turned it back on the next morning, all hell broke loose. 33 transaction decline alerts, 29 missed calls. Texts from my mother, my father, my sister, all caps, frantic. They had landed in Athens with no hotel, no yacht, no return flight. And that was just the beginning. Because what I didn't know then was that this wasn't the first time they'd used my name. It wasn't even the second. It had been happening for years. And soon, I was going to find out just how deep it went. Growing up, I used to think my family was just tightly knit. That's what people said about us, the Kellers from Charlotte, North Carolina. 2 daughters, one golden, one invisible. Dad, Richard, was the kind of man who measured love in usefulness. Mom, Cheryl, handled manipulation like a second language. And Emma, the favorite, could burn down the house and still get sympathy for inhaling the smoke. I used to think it was normal, the way my mom would call me, the practical one, while handing Emma every opportunity like it was preordained. Emma got a car at 16. I got a used laptop for schoolwork. When she got into Duke, they threw a dinner party. When I got into a small art school in Atlanta, my dad just said, "You sure that's a real degree?" The hierarchy was clear. Emma was the investment. I was the insurance policy. When my dad's business, an HVAC supply company, started slipping during the pandemic, I was the first one they called. I was 24, freelancing full-time, still barely surviving. But Mom made it sound small, harmless. "Sweetheart, could we use your name for a small loan? You've got good credit, it's just paperwork." I was young, dumb, desperate for their approval. I signed what she sent me without reading every line. Months later, I noticed my credit score dip 60 points. She brushed it off, said it was a clerical error. It took years to fix, and I never even knew what they'd used it for. Freelancing wasn't easy, but I loved it. I paid my rent on time, built up a little savings. Mom called every week to check in, but the questions were always the same. "How's your income now? Still using the same bank? Did you file your taxes yet?" It was subtle, but I started realizing she only called when they needed something. When Emma's tuition was late. When Dad's car needed new tires. I lent them money, thinking I was being kind. They always said, "We'll pay you back soon." They never did. And then last Christmas, everything changed. They showed up to my apartment for dinner, unannounced as usual. Emma pranced in wearing new designer boots, talking about her spring trip to Paris with her boyfriend. Dad made himself a drink like he owned the place. Mom hugged me and said, "You've really made this space work for you, honey." Cozy. Halfway through dinner, Dad casually asked if I'd gotten a bonus from any clients. I laughed, said no, but I was doing better this year. He nodded like he was happy for me, but there was this flicker in his eyes, calculating. That was the night I told them I might take a short solo vacation soon, just a week somewhere warm. Something for myself. Mom smiled too wide. "You deserve that, sweetie," she said. "Just make sure your passport's up to date." I thought it was support. It was reconnaissance. A week later came that text about using my card for Emma's textbooks. I didn't think twice. The truth. I wanted them to finally treat me like part of the family. I wanted to be trusted. But the Kellers didn't want trust. They wanted access. And when I gave them my card, I didn't just hand over numbers. I handed over every inch of control I'd clawed back from them since moving out. That's why when I saw those charges pile up, and that "private family trip" text hit my phone, something in me broke, but not in the way they expected. I wasn't going to cry this time. I was done being the backup plan. That night, when I canceled everything, I didn't feel guilty. I felt powerful for the first time in years. But that power came with a cost. Because while they were stranded in Athens trying to figure out what happened, my dad was already working on something much darker. Something that would hit me harder than the money ever could. The silence after Greece lasted exactly 6 days. 6 days of no calls, no texts, no emails. I started to believe maybe they were too humiliated to face me. I could almost feel peace creeping back into my chest. I worked, slept, even laughed with friends again. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch every time my phone buzzed. Then, on the 7th day, it came not from my family, but from one of my oldest clients, a small architecture firm in Raleigh. The subject line was polite. "Concern, question regarding recent events." I opened it, half curious, half dreading. "Hi Nora, we've received a rather troubling anonymous email about you. It alleges that you've been involved in some financial misconduct against close family members. It also mentions you're currently facing legal action. We're not sure what's true, but we thought we'd give you a chance to respond before taking any steps. Regards, Tom." I froze. Attached was the email. It was written like a report, formal, detailed, too organized for a random scam. It listed real information. My address, my business website, even the name of my bank. The message accused me of fraud, said I'd stolen significant funds from family accounts, and that I was emotionally unstable. The sender used a fake name, Patricia Lowell, but I didn't need to Google it to know who it was. The tone, the phrasing, it reeked of my father. He was always the one who wrote long, over-explained lies. Even when I was a kid, he'd type up summaries of arguments to make himself sound reasonable. He liked control, documentation, and the illusion of professionalism. I stared at that email for 10 minutes before forwarding it to myself. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like I'd sprinted. Then I checked the sender's IP address using a tracing tool. Charlotte, North Carolina, my parents' zip code. That same week, I lost another client, no explanation. Then another vendor I partnered with messaged me saying someone had sent them a warning about my reputation. They weren't done punishing me. They couldn't shame me face to face, so they tried to erase me. The irony. All I'd done was protect what was mine. So I did what I had to. I gathered every email, every message, every receipt of their theft and harassment, and sent it to a lawyer friend of mine, Rachel, who specialized in online defamation and harassment. She called me the next morning. "You've got enough here for a cease and desist," she said. "Maybe even a civil suit if they don't stop." I didn't want to go to war, not yet. I just wanted it documented. But my dad didn't stop. 3 days later, he sent an email to my uncle, Michael, their longtime business partner. The subject line, "Nora's unstable behavior." Michael forwarded it to me immediately. In it, my dad claimed I had sabotaged their Greece trip out of jealousy, that I was obsessive and vindictive, and that my mental health was spiraling. He even CC'd 2 relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. It wasn't just about smearing me, he wanted to rewrite the entire story. Michael called me that night. His voice was heavy. "Nora," he said, "your dad's been doing stuff like this for a while. You're not crazy." He told me something that made my stomach drop. Last year, my parents had tried to rope him into co-signing a family business loan. When he asked questions, he found out it was really for a down payment on a beach timeshare. When he refused, my dad blamed him for holding the family back. That conversation ended with Michael saying something I'll never forget. "They've been using you, Nora. They just ran out of ways to hide it." The next morning, I woke up to a call from Rachel, the lawyer. She'd traced all 3 anonymous emails. Same IP, same device ID. My parents' home network. That was the moment I stopped feeling guilty for what I'd done in Greece. Because they weren't victims. They were predators. And they'd been doing it for years, manipulating, stealing, and gaslighting me into silence. But they'd made one fatal mistake. They underestimated how far I'd go once I finally saw them clearly. And that's when something unexpected happened, something that would expose every secret they'd buried. It was a random Friday afternoon when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. No greeting, no context, just, "Check your email, Emma's an idiot." I stared at the text for a full minute, confused, until I noticed the number. It looked familiar. Then it hit me: Logan, Emma's ex-boyfriend. The one my parents always called a parasite and a bad influence. The same Logan who once hacked the school's network to change his GPA and got suspended for it. I hesitated before opening my email. There it was, a single message from an anonymous address with a zip file attached. The subject line said, "She never changed the password." I clicked it, expecting spam or maybe revenge porn, something ugly. But instead, the folder opened into something worse. Screenshots, voice notes, shared notes files, all synced from the old Keller family iCloud account. The one my mom set up years ago to keep us organized. My stomach dropped. Emma had given Logan access back when they were dating, and apparently she never revoked it. I opened the first screenshot. It was a text thread between Mom, Dad, and Emma from 3 months before the Greece trip. The first message was from Mom: "Let's keep this between us. Nora doesn't need to know yet." Then Dad: "We'll put the travel costs on her card. It's her turn to give back. She's freelancing anyway. Not like she has real expenses." Emma replied with a laughing emoji and wrote, "We'll just say it's for my graduation. She won't care once we're back." My hands were shaking as I kept scrolling. They had spreadsheets, literal budgets, breaking down how much they could charge without triggering fraud alerts. Flights, hotel, yacht, even a line item labeled shopping allowance. One comment from Mom read, "If she finds out, guilt her. Say it's a family trip for Emma's big milestone. She'll fold like always." And at the bottom of one shared note, a final line from Dad: "Get her something small when we return so it looks thoughtful. Maybe a bracelet." My throat went dry. They had planned everything, not just the theft, but the cover story. Every word, every manipulation. They knew I'd discover it eventually, and they already had their defense ready. They didn't just betray me. They calculated it. The deeper I went, the worse it got. Voice memos of them laughing about how tight I was with money, emails about my credit history, even a photo of my driver's license my mom must have taken from an old document. They had been using me like a safety net for years, and they weren't even ashamed. I forwarded everything to Rachel, my lawyer. Then, without thinking twice, I sent it all to Uncle Michael. He called me 10 minutes later. "Jesus Christ, Nora," he said quietly. "You need to hear this. Your dad's been on thin ice with the business for months. This seals it." By the end of the day, my father was officially removed from the company. Michael sent me the documents. Immediate termination of any financial authority. My mom's consulting role was gone, too. They lost everything. And then, just when I thought I'd finally won, when I thought their lies had been buried, something happened that made me realize just how much deeper this went. Because 3 days later, I woke up to a knock on my door. It was my mother. No makeup, no jewelry, just a grocery bag clutched to her chest and a folder under her arm. When I opened the door, she didn't even say hi. She just looked at me with those calm, cold eyes and said, "You weren't supposed to find out like this." And that's when I knew this wasn't an apology. This was a negotiation. She stood in my doorway like she owned the air between us. My mother, Cheryl Keller, flawless manipulator, world-class actress, and professional victim. The woman who once told me tears were a waste of control. Only this time she looked deflated. Her hair unbrushed, her lipstick gone, eyes sunken but sharp. She held a wrinkled grocery bag like a shield. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice didn't sound like guilt. It sounded like business. Against every instinct in me, I opened the door. I needed to know what her angle was. She sat on the edge of my couch and pulled out a folder from the bag. Inside were papers, old tax forms, student loan documents, credit statements. My name was on almost every page. Some signatures were mine, others were not. "Where did you get these?" I asked. My voice came out tighter than I meant. Her eyes flickered, that old familiar look she gave right before lying. "We just wanted to get everything out in the open. It's time to move forward." She slid another envelope toward me. Handwritten, all caps, my name on the front. I opened it. Inside was a letter, written in my dad's messy block handwriting. "We all made mistakes. The business situation can still be fixed. If you reach out to Uncle Michael, maybe he'll reconsider. It's in everyone's best interest to make peace. You can help us rebuild." No apology, no accountability. Just manipulation dressed as logic. I felt something inside me harden. I asked her directly, "Why did you even do it? Why Greece? Why use my card?" She looked down at her hands. For a second, I thought she might actually tell the truth. Then she said something that made my blood run cold. "We thought you wouldn't notice." Then she laughed, this quiet, humorless sound. "It was supposed to be temporary. You're doing well now, we just needed a little help. You always make such a big deal out of small things." Small things, $14,000, my name, my reputation. I stared at her for a long time before saying, "You didn't come here to apologize. You came here to see if I'd still save you." Her silence was the answer. Finally, she spoke again, voice trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. "We're in trouble, Nora. The business tanked after your uncle pushed us out. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. Dad cashed out his retirement. We're drowning." Her eyes lifted, watery but cold underneath. "You could talk to Michael. You have influence now. You could help us get back in." That's when it clicked. This wasn't a visit, it was a pitch. They didn't care that they'd stolen from me, smeared my name, or forged my signature. They only cared that they'd lost their power, and I now had some of it. She leaned forward and whispered, "We're still your parents." That should matter for something. I stood up. "It used to." I told her to leave. She didn't argue. She just picked up her bag, walked to the door, and before leaving turned to say, "You'll regret cutting us off. You always need family eventually." When the door closed behind her, I locked it twice. Then I went to my desk, scanned every document, every fake signature, every trace of proof she'd brought, and sent it all to Rachel, my lawyer. Then I called Uncle Michael. He answered on the second ring. "She came by, didn't she?" he said before I could speak. "How did you know?" "Because your father emailed me again yesterday. Asked for a reference to apply for a job at another firm. I told him no, and now," his tone shifted, "now I don't feel bad for the final step." "What step?" I asked. He sighed. "The restructuring's finalized. Your father's out permanently. His shares, what's left of them, are being transferred to you. You'll get the paperwork next week." I couldn't speak. It hit me slowly. I hadn't just destroyed their trip. I had inherited everything they lost trying to control. And that's when I realized something else. They weren't done. Because a week later, Emma called, not to defend them, not to yell. Her voice was quiet, broken. "Nora," she said, "you need to see what I found on Mom's phone." When I heard Emma's voice on the phone, it didn't sound like the sister I grew up with, the one who used to roll her eyes at me, the one who'd mock my thrift store shoes. This version of her sounded hollow. "Nora," she said quietly, "I know you probably hate me, but I found something. You need to see it." I didn't trust her at first. She'd been part of it, smiling in those Greece photos, sipping champagne bought with my card. She hadn't apologized once, so I stayed silent long enough for her to get nervous. Finally, she said, "Please, I'm not calling to defend them, just check your email." There was an attachment, screenshots again, dozens of them, my mom's iCloud backup. The first image was an email draft addressed to one of my clients, never sent, but written by my mom. "To whom it may concern, we wanted to make you aware of ongoing legal matters involving your designer, Nora Keller." It was the same kind of smear campaign my dad had launched before. Only this time, it was Mom's handwriting. I scrolled. There were notes between my parents, plans to open a joint family consultancy under my name. They'd been trying to register an LLC using my credentials, my tax ID, my signature. I almost dropped the phone. Then came the worst part. A note written by my dad, dated the month before the Greece trip. "If things go south with Michael, use Nora's business credit for temporary coverage. She won't notice. She's careless with monitoring accounts." He knew exactly what he was doing. They planned to sink me long before I ever canceled their flights. The next screenshot was from Emma's messages with Mom. I could tell from the timestamps it was recent, just 3 days old. Mom wrote, "Don't worry about your sister, she'll cool off. Once she sees how bad things are, she'll have to help. She can't stand looking like the bad guy." Emma had replied, "She's not coming back, she's done." And then Mom's final message, "Then we'll make sure she's the villain." I stopped breathing for a second. I felt this cold, metallic clarity settle in my chest. They weren't just liars, they were architects of manipulation. Every time I'd doubted myself growing up, every time I'd apologized for overreacting, they'd been fine-tuning that narrative for years. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just sat there, rereading the messages until the anger settled into strategy. They wanted to ruin my reputation. I could ruin their reality. I called Rachel, my lawyer, and sent her everything. This time, I told her to go all in. She drafted a formal cease and desist for harassment, identity misuse, and attempted fraud, naming both Richard and Cheryl Keller directly. She also suggested something else. "If they've forged signatures," she said, "we could file for criminal investigation, but you'll need one more solid piece of proof." That's when Emma said something that changed everything. "There's more," she whispered. "Mom has a second phone. Dad doesn't know about it. It's where she keeps everything, photos, recordings, copies of letters." I asked how she knew. "Because she made me hold it once," she said. "Told me if anything ever happened to her, that phone was the insurance policy." My pulse kicked into overdrive. "Where is it?" "She hides it in her jewelry box. Same old silver one. I'll get it to you, just promise me one thing." "What?" "Don't tell her it was me." 2 days later, I got a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was that silver jewelry box. I pried it open. Nestled between a fake pearl necklace and a folded wad of bills was a phone, cracked, ancient, but still working. When I powered it on, I found a folder labeled backups. It wasn't just screenshots. It was audio, recordings of phone calls, conversations between my parents about money, about me, about making things right by reclaiming what's ours. But one recording froze me completely. My mom's voice, "If it comes to it, we'll say she agreed to everything. She's too emotional to fight back, she always caves." My dad replied, "And if she doesn't," her voice turned sharp, "then we make her look crazy. Same as last time." Last time, that phrase wouldn't leave my head. Because until that moment, I thought Greece was their first big betrayal. I didn't know there had been a last time. And finding out what last time meant would destroy whatever piece of family I thought I had left. That phrase, "same as last time," echoed in my skull for days. It sat there like a splinter I couldn't pull out. I couldn't sleep, couldn't work, couldn't think straight. I knew it meant something ugly. And I knew my mom wouldn't have said it unless there was a history behind it. So I called the one person who always told me the truth, even when it hurt, my grandmother, Evelyn Keller. She lived 2 towns over in Gastonia. She'd never taken sides in family arguments. She always said, "Silence keeps you safe when the Kellers start fighting." But when she picked up the phone and I asked her what last time meant, she didn't hesitate. She sighed, the kind of long, heavy sigh that sounds like a confession. "Oh, Nora," she said softly, "I was wondering when you'd find out." "What happened?" I asked. My voice shook. She told me everything. When I was in college, about 10 years ago, my parents had taken out a business loan in my name. $18,000. They used my social security number, my credit, and forged my signature. I had no idea. The loan was repaid within a year, which was why I never saw the damage. But Grandma said she remembered the night my dad bragged about it. "He said your good credit saved the family," she said. "I thought you knew. I thought you'd agreed." My stomach twisted. I hadn't agreed. I hadn't even known. "That was the first time," she continued quietly. "When they got away with it, your father said something that chilled me. He told your mother, 'We raised her right. She's obedient. We can always count on her to clean up after us.'" Obedient. That word made my hands shake. They'd tested me years ago, learned I wouldn't question them, and then spent a decade taking advantage of that obedience. Greece wasn't an accident. It was an escalation. They'd been using me as their financial escape hatch since I was 19. I sat there in silence while Grandma kept talking, her voice trembling. "They've always been this way, honey. Your father, he thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Your mother, she just wants to live well and not work for it. But they knew what they were doing. Don't let them twist that." I thanked her, hung up, and just stared at the wall. Everything made sense now, the probing questions about my bank, the interest in my clients, the obsession with whether I was doing well. They weren't proud. They were scouting. I pulled out the phone Emma had sent me and went back through the recordings. Sure enough, buried in the middle of the files, there was one labeled 2015. I pressed play. It was my mother's voice, clearer this time, sharper, younger. "She'll never check her credit reports. She's too busy playing artist. We'll pay it off before she even knows. She owes us that much." Then my father, "If she finds out," a pause. Then Mom again, "She won't. And even if she does, she'll believe whatever we tell her." That was the moment my sympathy died. They hadn't made a mistake. They'd made a system. A way to use me, manipulate me, and still call it love. I stayed up all night replaying that recording. Not to hurt myself with it, but to make sure I never forgot the tone in her voice. That smug, confident certainty that I would always forgive them. By morning, I had a new plan. I called Rachel, my lawyer, and told her I wanted to file, not just for harassment, but for financial fraud, forgery, and identity misuse. She warned me it would get ugly. I said, "Good." Then I called Uncle Michael. I told him everything. He was silent for a long time, then said, "You know, your dad always told me you weren't business-minded. Guess we both misjudged that." And that's when he told me something else, something that would make my revenge complete. He'd already restructured the business. Not only was my father's share permanently revoked, but Michael was creating a trust, and he wanted me to oversee it when he retired. The same company my parents had used to bleed the family dry would soon belong, legally and publicly, to me. That wasn't just karma. That was justice, signed and notarized. But I wasn't finished yet, because my parents still thought they had control of the story. And I was about to rewrite it so thoroughly, they'd never recover their reputation again. The day everything came full circle started like any other coffee, inbox, quiet apartment. But underneath that stillness was a cold kind of clarity. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done pretending I didn't know who my parents were. They had spent decades rewriting history. I was about to publish the unedited version. I started small. I printed every document, every forged signature, every screenshot, every text that proved what they'd done. I attached them to a single, detailed email, no emotion, just dates, evidence, and receipts. Then I hit send, not to my parents, but to every single person they'd tried to poison against me, extended family, old business contacts, even the clients they'd secretly emailed. Subject line: "For the record, the truth." Inside, I wrote, "Please stop asking me to reconcile with my parents. What they've done isn't a misunderstanding, it's fraud, manipulation, and abuse. Attached are records of everything. I won't be discussing this again." And that was it. No rant, no name-calling, just facts. Within hours, my phone blew up, not with outrage, but with silence. The kind that follows after people finally see who the villains really are. Uncle Michael called that night, half shocked, half proud. "You did it clean," he said. "You didn't stoop to their level. That's going to sting worse than anything." He was right. Because for narcissists like my parents, silence is worse than scandal. It means no one's listening anymore. A few days later, the legal letters went out formal cease and desist notices for harassment and attempted fraud. Rachel had included the recordings as evidence. They were bulletproof. By the end of that week, the Kellers' phone lines were dead silent. Their consultancy was dissolved. Their credit accounts frozen pending investigation. I didn't even have to lift a finger after that. The system did the rest. A month later, Michael sent me the final paperwork. My father's revoked shares in the business, the same business they once bragged I was too emotional to understand, were legally transferred into my name. When I saw the official document, my hands shook. Not from shock, but relief. Everything they'd built on lies now legally belonged to the daughter they tried to erase. But that wasn't the part that hit hardest. That came when I got a letter in the mail from my mother. No return address, just her handwriting. Inside. "You've destroyed everything. We gave you life and you took ours. I hope it was worth it." I read it once and smiled, because it was worth it, every sleepless night, every tear I refused to shed, every time I doubted myself. For the first time, I wasn't the Keller family's insurance policy. I was their reckoning. Emma and I still talk cautiously. She's moved out, started rebuilding her life piece by piece. She told me once, "You didn't ruin the family, Nora. You just turned on the lights." And she's right. Because now, when I think of them, my parents, their fake vacations, their smug smiles, I don't feel anger. I feel distance. The kind that doesn't ache anymore. Last week, Uncle Michael called with one last update. The trust was finalized. He's retiring soon, and I'll be taking over as managing partner. He laughed when he said it. Fitting, isn't it? The company stays in the family, just not in their hands. I laughed too, because it was perfect poetic justice without needing poetry. The truth is, revenge didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like breathing clean air for the first time. My parents still tell people I betrayed them. Let them. Their voices don't reach me anymore. Because when you finally stop bleeding for people who cut you on purpose, it doesn't feel like loss. It feels like freedom. And freedom, I've learned, is the best kind of revenge.